I'm Laura. I'm an alcoholic. I thank you, Lisa, for asking me to speak tonight. Um, I'm your second choice. There was weather and the speaker that Lisa had scheduled couldn't make it. So sorry. Um, it's so weird because when I was pregnant with my son, who he's here tonight, he's just turned 7. I was, I was the secretary on Sunday night. And so, it's a whole different thing, sharing my experience, strength, and hope. So, this will be interesting, but, especially here in my home group. My husband's here tonight. My sponsor's online. My friends are here. So it's like, I can't make up stories, I guess. So I have a sobriety date. It's December 17th, 2010. I have a sponsor. I sponsor women in this program. I have a home group. It's this group. I'm your commitment coordinator. I always have a commitment here. I try to stay pretty nested in this group. And that helps me a lot in my life. I have a story, that's quintessential, my behavior, right? Back in the day, when I was 11, I, was playing with the neighborhood kids at the elementary school, playing basketball. And I remember seeing the janitor, cute guy, in his early 20s or whatever, come out from one of the buildings and slip behind the bushes. And I was like, what's he doing? And I got a good angle and I saw him pull out a weed pipe and take a hit, and I was like, I did not think for one moment. My feet took off and I stood in front of him with my 11-year-old self and I said, give me some or I'm telling. And where did that come from? And that was me. And then I went, took a couple hits, went back and played with my friends and did not say a word because I didn't want anyone to tell their mom or whatever. I didn't want to ruin my game, So anyway, and that's how I roll. And I don't know where it came from. I don't know, but here I am. I grew up my dad was always drinking. My mom was pretty absent. My brother was a middle school dropout. He was on the streets by 13, practicing the pharmaceutical trade, illustrious pharmaceutical trade. I was I don't know. I was trying to hold it all together and look good, but I felt like that was my role, I guess. When I was 8 or something, my dad sat me down and said, okay, we're going to write out the 49ers offensive lineup, offensive setup, and you're going to write out all the players, and then we're going to do the defense, and then we're going to do the subs, the coaches, whatever. And then we're going to go through all the plays and you're going to memorize it. He would quiz me. And then, all his friends would come over on Sundays and, I would pipe up with my little 8-year-old self and be like, come on, Montana, why aren't you going down the middle? And all his friends would be just laughing at me. And, it was I learned early and my dad was the same way. He was an actor, he was a showman and I learned really early that putting on a show, performing for people, figuring out what they wanted, was what would get me some accolades, and I really figured out that that's how, I didn't know at the time, but I had no self-confidence. I didn't know who I was. I was grounded in nothing, And so your external validation, you giving me something, filled me up. And so I worked for that, that turned into performing for the teachers and the coaches and my friends and, not that I really had any friends. I didn't know how to be a good friend. So I never really had any good friends, but I was always like working, um, to try to look good. And what that got me was a lot of like disappointment and letdown and like feeling like I wasn't ever good enough. And like, I just all the buzz in my head about like, well, what do I need to do? Oh, that person thinks this about me. So I need to go now and perform this way and help them think this about me. And, like, I don't know. I was always like thinking and calculating and, trying to manage everybody around me. And so I have to tell you, yeah, Dioberto, you hear me. And so I had to tell you, I am so grateful for alcohol because during that time, I would have died without alcohol, it was that like relief. And I'll tell you the truth, I don't remember my first drink. It was always like alcohol was always around in our house. And so, I don't know. I just drank it. I remember my brother's first drink when I got him drunk. He's like 11. But anyway, I don't remember my first drink. I just feel like it was always there, So I think, oh, did I bring hold on. Oh, sorry. Uh, so yeah, when I read the big book, when I read pages 60 to 63, where Bill W talks about the third step, and he's, turn your will and your life over and la la la. And he talks about like the actor, the director, that's like really what that boils down to is like someone who is just totally in self-will and trying to direct and correct and manipulate and like make everything fit the way that she thinks it should fit, right? And that I read that and I was like, oh, I got goosebumps. Like, I kind of relate. And so like what all the solution for that is to let go and accept like that I'm not in charge and blah, blah, blah. But I had no concept of that, before, like I had no idea that I could do that or that even existed. So what happened for me, like I was performing well academically. Oh, I tried to be a comedian. I studied that, like I tried, and I was not that good. So I figured I'd just stick to academics, And so, I built a career on my like obsession with like knowing everything and looking good and always having the answer and, and that was exhausting. And I had to drink more and more. And, when I would get something wrong or I would have a day where I let somebody down or something, didn't feel right, it was like, I had to drink. It wasn't a choice. And I got to the place where I was drinking pretty much every day and using, and, there wasn't another way. And I was very isolated. It was me in my apartment in San Francisco with my dog and my job, and then I was a chemistry experiment, like lots of coffee. I would go in my building. There was a Starbucks on the ground floor. I would get a quad shot latte and then drink a like Red Bull after that. And like, and then, it was just like figuring out what out here could I pour into my body to make me feel okay. Right. And so in 2007, my dad comes to see me and he has this like lump on his chest and I was like, I don't think it's a big deal. I'll go to the doctor, whatever. He calls me a few days later. He's like, yeah, they had me do all this imaging and I'm seeing this hematologist oncologist. And I was like, what? So I drove down there. He was like living in Roseville. I drove and went with him. And the doctor that we'd never met was like, you have cancer in your brain, your chest, your abdomen, your pelvis, there's nothing we can do. And so, it took me like a week to find my brother on the streets. And the three of us were at my dad's place for exactly 9 weeks after that diagnosis. He died, and for those 9 weeks, the three of us just drank. Like, and it's so interesting to look back on, right? Because hindsight is 2020. I mean, we didn't connect. We didn't talk about how we loved each other. Like, we just drank, and that's what we knew how to do. And, after my dad died, my brother was gone and again, and, I really felt like I had no one. Like, my dad was crazy, but he was kind of like my anchor, and so it revved up my disease. And he died in July of 2007. And in August of 2007, I got in really big trouble. And thank goodness. And, I basically lost my career. In one moment, I had to like give up my apartment. I had gave up everything. And I had this friend that lived in Sacramento, but I knew her from UC Davis, and she had just passed the California bar, and she got a job opportunity in Walnut Creek. So she was like, come live with me. And my boyfriend were moving to Walnut Creek. And so she was like the last friend I had. So I lived with her and I tried to do what they were telling me to do. I was getting drug tested, and I was, I was showing up here. I would get here like 1 minute before the meeting started, sit in the back, and then leave. As soon as it was over, I'd like run out and I'd be like, oh, AA doesn't work. And, and I was just like, I was pissed at the world. Like, I didn't understand why you guys were so happy. And it was just so uncomfortable. I mean, the idea of even like walking up to someone and saying hi, that was not what I did. I didn't do that. And that was too scary, honestly, so I came here because they told me to. And so I was, getting drug tested, and I would like check at 5 a.m. and see if I had to test or not that day. And if I didn't, then I would like take 7 shots of whiskey really fast. And then I would like drink a gallon of water and then go exercise at the gym for like 3 hours. Like, it was insanity. I was drinking to drink, like, for no reason. Like, it was so weird, like I wasn't even treating that stuff in my head anymore. I was just like insane. And it sucked. And I was so alone with it, and yeah. And so my roommate and her boyfriend, they went on a weekend, whatever, they were out of town, and I was alone at that house. And it was like February of 2008. And I had ordered some, medication online that I knew would kill me. And I sat in my bedroom, the house is all closed up. I injected that medication and I knew I was going to die. I looked in the mirror and I was like, there's no other choice. I can't do this, and I can't drink, and I can't, I can't. And so, what happened for me was that, the lady next door, I guess, I heard this later, she heard me moaning. And I mean, I don't know how she heard it. The house was all closed up, and she apparently told my roommate later, like, that the moaning sounded desperate and horrible, and she knew that something was wrong. And so she called 911, and they broke into the house and they saved my life. And I woke up in the ICU at John Muir, and I was like, geez, I can't even do that, right? Still here. And I ended up, I was in the hospital for like 2 weeks, and then I was in the psych hospital, and then, whatever. And they, sent me to this depression program, and they diagnosed me with all these things and gave me medication. And I was like, all right, well, do what you will. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I am clearly broken and useless. I had nothing to offer anybody. And, so, nothing really was helping that much. Like the depression program was like sitting over there, like talking about how sad you were and drawing some pictures about it. I don't know. It didn't help me. I mean, I hope it helps other people, but it didn't help me. And so I ended up back here, and I started drinking again. I kept drinking and it wasn't even working, and I was just like so miserable. And I knew you guys had something here. And so I ended up back here in AA, and, I started like slowly hearing a message of hope, which I was completely blinded to early on, You'll notice like I got in big trouble in 2007 and my sobriety date is in 2010. So like I am a slow learner. It took time and it took time even after that. I remember I went to the Friday night young people's meeting. And I had drank that day and I would go to meetings and tell people I was sober and I had drank and, this girl, Sarah, who some of you know, she was like, you smell like alcohol. And I was like, oh, how can you tell? She's like, dude, you can't hustle a hustler. Like, go on. And so I was like, you're right. And you know what she did? She got a few other women in that group and they took me out and they sat with me for like hours that night. And like, they were like, Laura, you can't, like, you want to be sober, but you're drinking. Like, what's the disconnect, and like that level of kindness, like I hadn't seen that before. I was so like cut off from people. I had such attitude. If you know me, you probably know that, but it was way worse. And there were a lot of people showing me kindness, and, that night, like, it was really life-changing. And I got a sponsor that, I started to be able to hear. And I started like really working this program, and I think, we have that resistance. Like I was just recently reading with my sponsor, Helping Others. And it's like, Bill says it, like, if you are talking to somebody who's not ready, don't waste your time. Like they're not ready. And if you're telling someone that they need to be sober, then you're doing it wrong, because like what happens is we have to come to our own realization that we're spiritually broken and we need something more, we have to come to that realization. We have to find that like openness and willingness ourselves. And like, you can't do that for anybody else. And, but the kindness of the people around here and, the way that people, like would accept some of my like interesting behavior, like, and still like, hang out with me. Like that was like really what helped me hang on, so, I had like some pretty amazing things happen once I started staying sober, once I started doing the work and I was like, consistently like going to meetings, working with my sponsor, like being of service, like we talk about the first 11 steps. That's where I like get myself right. That's the work that I need to do to take care of myself so that I can do step 12. Right. So once I started, really doing those first steps and then actually practicing step 12, where I was practicing the principles in my life, I was working to help others, like the amazing things started to happen, and it took a long time and I worked really hard, but I got, I was able to get my career back, and I met my husband who, we're celebrating our 10-year wedding anniversary this year, which is like crazy to me. And I remember when I met him, I was like, oh, I know this guy's great, this is a good one. And so I don't want to tell him that I'm an alcoholic. He's going to think I'm bad. Like it's going to be bad. Right. And I remember the night that I sat there and I was like, I'm an alcoholic in recovery. And he was like, oh, that's great. That was his reaction. I was like, what the? Who are you? Like, what? And, he was like, that's great that you're working on yourself. How wonderful, And I was like, oh, well, that's a perspective shift, like, okay. Clearly you don't know me. And it's still like he sees the very best in me all the time. Like, what an amazing person. And I like around, I don't know, at some point a few years ago, I like got kind of like really interested in the emotional sobriety essay that Bill W. wrote. I don't know if you guys have ever read that. If you haven't, check it out. It's in what's that book called? Language of the Heart. And anyway, there's an emotional sobriety meeting at Mayhew. I started going to that every week, and it's just really interesting because Bill W. wrote that essay when he was like 20 something years sober, and he found himself still having these bouts of depression, right? So he was like, what is wrong with me? I'm sober, I'm doing all this stuff. Like, he started the program of AA, like he was surrounded, right? And he figured out that he still had these certain dependencies in his life. He was dependent on his marriage being perfect, let's say. And therefore, he would make these demands on Lois and make these demands on himself. You need to do it this way. And those things would end up leaving him disappointed, depressed, discouraged, right? And so he figured out like that he was still doing that. He was still basically, if you break it down, he doesn't say it, but he was still in the bondage of self. And so, when what he talks about at the end of the emotional sobriety essay is he says, spiritual footing comes from trying to give rather than demanding that I receive. So I'll say that again. Spiritual footing comes from trying to give rather than demanding that I receive. And so, there's like these subtle ways that I can demand that I receive, right? And that I make these demands on, people and things in my life. And that blocks me from being in that giving mode, right? We know that the daily reprieve from alcoholism is like a spiritual maintenance, right? So what does that look like? What is that? And I mean, I said that for a long time. What is spiritual maintenance? Like, what's she talking about? And so, what all it is, I've concluded today is really like connection. And I can't be connected to you if I'm not like in service mode, right? If I'm not trying to give. When I'm like demanding that I receive something because I'm in fear or I'm whatever, thinking that things need to be perfect, then I'm selfish, self-centered, and I am certainly not connected to you, right? And so, the thing that gets tricky, right, is how can I wake up every day and spend most of the moments of my day being of service and trying to give, it requires that I like, sleep and eat well and exercise and, brush my teeth so I don't get a toothache and go see my doctor and take care of my health. And, and then also it requires that I have like, these deep, amazing relationships with my women friends today. Like, I have people in my life that, I mean, I've never ever had that like show up for me and I show up for them. And, that sustains me. That allows me to, it allows me to be in a fed place where I have enough to give. Right. And if I don't have that, if I'm not getting like my sponsor often says when I meet with her, like, how's the self-care? How's the self-care going? Thanks, Cynthia. And it's like, because if I don't have that down, if I'm not doing that, then I can't show up and give. And when I used to go to meetings, I would show up at the meeting and I'd be like, okay, I'm feeling terrible. All this stuff going on. My life is so hard and I'm going to this meeting. I'm going to get fixed. And today I show up at the meeting. How can I be of service? What can I do today for you? And, I totally have to force myself. I don't wake up and say like, oh, I've been struck golden, and I'm like an angel and I just give. No. I wake up and, think about myself and then say, oh, wait, wait a second. And, and I have to tell myself, like, I'm at home at 5 o'clock on Sunday thinking, oh man, it's so cold out. I'd rather stay here, and watch Netflix. And I swear I say that like every week. And then I come here because I know where the solution is, and I show up and I ask you how you're doing and whatever. And like I start feeling better and I forget about myself and I start feeling better. And that's like, so it's such a crazy concept to me because, it's like, I remember the time when there was a certain thing going on in my life that was really horrible. And I would, every week I'd meet with my sponsor and I would talk about it. And I'd be like, this is really horrible and there's no solution and blah, blah, blah. And finally she stopped me because she was very patient and kind and loving and like, this is really hard. And then finally she stopped and she said, we're not getting anywhere with this. You're not in the solution, and, and people, a lot of people call it God. She said like, where's God in this situation, and I call it like the universe or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. Right. But there has to be something like outside of me that's like trying to make these decisions and go with this. And I swear she did me such a favor by saying that. And I was pissed at her that day, I'll tell you the truth. Because I was really annoyed that she told me to stop, and that, yeah. But it was like, I was really like obsessing about something that I couldn't control. Right. And so I need someone to remind me to like stop and turn it over. And, and I go back to that, like spiritual footing, like comes from trying to give rather than demanding that I receive. Because when I'm obsessed with something, I'm demanding that I receive. I'm demanding that, this person do things differently and that the world is different and it fits better for me. I often go to that place and then it's like, oh yeah, okay. So, it's interesting. I've seen lately, there's a couple academic studies that have come out that have said that the definition, or let's say the opposite of addiction is connection. And, like there's the rat guy that does the rat study about how if rats are together, they're not as likely to be addicted or whatever. Anyway, but it's, largely like we have kind of said academia doesn't know what alcoholism is, but they're starting to get an idea. And I really love that idea that addiction is just the opposite of connection, because I was alone and afraid and like drowning in a bottle, when I was practicing addiction. And, today it's like, I have this really easy, like flip, like if I'm struggling with something or someone, it's like, okay, am I like working toward connection or not? And if I'm not working toward connection, then I'm probably doing it wrong. I need to talk to somebody about it and figure out what I need to do differently. It's like the whole thing, my sponsees have heard me talk about this a lot. But when I first moved in with my wonderful, sweet husband, I went to my sponsor and I said, I am so annoyed. He leaves his shoes everywhere. You would not believe. He is so messy. And she looked at me and she was like, Laura, do you want to be with someone as uptight as you? And I was like, oh. And she was like, No, I don't. And so she was like, well, every time you see his shoes, I want you to say, oh, thank goodness that I'm with someone who's so laid back. And so I started doing that. And I'm telling you, it changed my life, you know? Like, and I really worked on that connection. I know. And so it really grew that connection with this like wonderful, sweet man who always gives me the benefit of the doubt and is so kind, you know? And like, and you know what? I self-sabotage. I ruin everything in my life if you give me the rope to do it because, you know, I want to get mad about the shoes. And so thank goodness, like I'm here and I can learn from you guys every day because otherwise I would not, you know, I don't know where I'd be. I'd be struggling. And it's so funny how, you know, like we try to go get fixed for our depression or whatever. And it's like, let's talk more about what's bothering me and whatever. But I come here and you guys lay out this like simple program, you know, fix yourself, clean house, help others, clean house, help others. You know, that's it. It's like, it's so simple. And I can easily come back to that if I focus on, you know, taking care of myself and then seeking connection, being of service, you know, and I'm so grateful today. You know, my brother, he called me when he got out, like, I don't know, 90 days after he gotten out of jail and he had 90 days clean and sober. And he was like, I'm taking a math skills class and I'm going to AA and I'm doing the thing, you know, and I'm doing it because I saw you do it. And today he's a civil engineer and he married an AA gal and has a couple kids and is like living the dream. And, you know, it's like which is such a gift to have my brother back, you know, and not only that, but we speak the same language. And today we're just like in awe of how you guys saved our lives. You took these like broken, crazy people and, you know, we're like actually contributing members of society today, you know, and doing the thing. And you know, and today I get to be proud of myself for being an alcoholic in recovery and, you know, working to better myself. And that was not easy, you know, because I lived under those layers of shame for so long. And so tonight, you know, I hope that each and every one of you, like whatever you're struggling with, whatever's like gumming up that connection piece for you, like you can find a way to let it go. Because things can be really good. You know, the world's right here at our feet tonight. I'll close with this. The other day, my sponsee texted me and she said, I'm really trying to have a perspective shift, and see that all of the things on my calendar as opportunities instead of obligations. And I was like, bravo, girl. Like, that is it. That is it right there. That is it. Today I get to show up here and I get to connect and I get to like hang out with you guys. I'm not alone suffering and in so much pain. And I'm so, so grateful for that. And I hope you can find that too. Thank you so much. I love you guys.